Humanity had been studied for centuries by distant powers that believed they had deciphered every nuance of this strange, emotional species from the blue world at the edge of a minor arm. Their analysts charted human history, measured wars, tallied casualties, and concluded that humans broke easily, fought fiercely only in bursts, and collapsed once pressure exceeded a predictable threshold. Empires across the council chamber clung to this conclusion as if it were law, convinced the species was destined to bow the moment a stronger civilization leaned on them. What they never understood was how humans behaved when cornered, insulted, or pushed past the line where fear ended and something older took its place. The ultimatum came with ceremonial arrogance. Humanity would surrender autonomy, accept direct supervision, and allow their worlds to be incorporated as resource dependencies. The leading delegates expected shock. Instead, Earth sent an envoy requesting clarification, hoping for dialogue, trying to de-escalate. It was this attempt at peace that triggered the Council's disdain. The ambassador was called a malfunctioning accident of biology pretending to be equal, a soft-skinned primitive undeserving of diplomatic consideration. Every word was transmitted back to Earth. The galaxy expected outrage. What they got was silence, and that silence was the first miscalculation. Minutes later, alien fleets struck human outposts with mechanical precision. Outlying installations went dark. Mining colonies vanished. Patrol craft were erased. Reports arrived so quickly that Earth hardly had time to absorb the scale of the assault. But the predicted panic never spiraled. Instead, something unified and focused spread across the planet. Every nation paused internal disputes, old rivalries dissolved, and global governments linked into a single emergency channel as if the species had rehearsed this moment for generations. The Council interpreted the rapid mobilization as desperation. In truth, it was alignment. Humanity processed grief differently from the patterns alien strategists expected. For other species, loss created paralysis. For humans, loss cleared hesitation. What the galaxy saw as fragility was simply emotional energy being forged into direction. Within hours, diplomatic channels froze and tactical networks expanded. Fleets that had never exercised together suddenly shared targeting systems. Civilian industries shifted production without request. Volunteers flooded enlistment portals in numbers so large the automated registries clogged. No empire had ever documented a species capable of such instantaneous self-coordination. The Council tried to force submission by escalating their assault, believing overwhelming force would break human cohesion. Instead, each strike amplified it. Every shattered relay station became a symbol. Every destroyed settlement transformed into motivation. Humanity had been peaceful not because they were weak, but because they believed cooperation was rational. Now cooperation took on a different shape, unifying not for diplomacy, but for survival and retribution. The moment that defined the shift was simple. Earth's Defense Command received final confirmation that multiple colonies had been wiped out without warning, without negotiation, without a single attempt at peaceful contact after the ultimatum. Something collective hardened. Leaders across continents exchanged a single agreement: humanity would not fall. They would not surrender. They would not allow themselves to be categorized as manageable. If the galaxy wanted obedience, they had chosen the wrong species. Behind the scenes, analysts gathered data from the first encounters. Patterns emerged that humans deciphered faster than the Council believed possible. Alien fleet formations, firing cycles, communication latency, shield harmonics. Every detail became a thread pulled apart and rewoven into countermeasures. Engineers worked without sleep. Strategists redrafted doctrines in real time. The species known for improvisation weaponized that creativity with terrifying speed. What truly changed, however, wasn't technology or tactics. It was mindset. Humanity realized something fundamental. The Council never expected resistance. They expected collapse. They believed Earth would kneel. That assumption, so casual, so arrogant, ignited a resolve the aliens had never imagined. Humans decided they would not merely survive the confrontation, they would ensure no empire would ever attempt to dominate them again. By the time the Council detected irregular human fleet activity, the shift was complete. The species they intended to pacify had awakened a collective determination that could not be measured by simulations or historical parallels. Humanity wasn't begging for mercy or pleading for negotiation. They were preparing. Quietly, methodically, relentlessly. And for the first time since the conflict began, alien observers noticed something unsettling in human transmissions. Not fear, not panic, but purpose. A calm, sharpened tone revealing a truth the galaxy should have recognized much earlier. Humans might bend. They might struggle. They might bleed. But falling was never part of their nature. Not before. Not now. Not ever. The first counterstrike was not a display of rage but of calculation. Humanity had listened, absorbed the blows, measured the enemy's confidence, and mapped their arrogance. Now the species the Council believed would crumble began assembling capabilities the galaxy never documented. Earth didn't announce retaliation, it prepared it with the precision of surgeons who had dissected their opponent's anatomy down to the molecular level. Everything classified, everything quiet, everything focused. Black sites long dismissed as rumors activated across the planet. Facilities buried beneath oceans, hidden in mountain cores, masked behind abandoned industrial zones, and sealed inside orbital shadows lit up as dormant programs sprang to life. Engineers unlocked vaults containing prototypes that were considered too aggressive for peaceful times. Systems designed for theoretical existential threats became operational within hours. Humanity had always developed worst-case scenario plans, not because they expected invasion, but because they understood their own history too well to ignore possibilities. Quantum mesh targeting networks synchronized across the solar system, creating a predictive web capable of mapping enemy fleet movement seconds before it happened. Gravity-piercing warheads, once shelved due to ethical debates, were recalibrated for precise application against hardened shields. Adaptive drone swarms that had been restricted to simulations deployed for the first time, each unit capable of rewriting its behavioral code mid-flight. Neurojamming arrays, originally built to counter theoretical psionic interference, were repurposed to shred the communication pathways of alien command ships. The retaliation began with absolute clarity and zero hesitation. Human strike groups didn't target frontline vessels first. They struck key relay craft, supply transports, and strategic nodes buried inside the alien formation. The Council expected humans to fire wildly, desperate for survival. Instead, every shot had purpose. Every burst of electronic interference had a target. Every drone swarm moved as if controlled by a single, cold mind. Weapon platforms rose from launch silos like silent predators taking flight, not to signal war, but to execute a plan that had been refined in the background for decades. Alien admirals watched their formations collapse without understanding what was happening. Ships that were supposed to be shield-locked lost synchronization. Flagged vessels found their targeting systems overridden. Navigation logs rewrote themselves mid-battle, forcing ships into chaotic spins. A coalition cruiser attempted to broadcast warnings, but its antenna array melted under a pulse that didn't match any known weapon's signature. Within minutes, the aliens realized they had never fought a species that treated warfare as both science and instinct. Humans fought with a fluidity that defied Council models. There was no pause after success, no overconfidence after disabling a fleet segment, no emotional triumph. The retaliation felt like the expression of a species that had shed hesitation the moment lives were taken unjustly. Earth didn't want revenge. Earth wanted certainty, certainty that those who attacked them could never repeat the attempt. The nasty protocols, a term coined decades earlier for humanity's most extreme defensive options, activated quietly. Their essence was simple: remove limitations when survival is threatened. Every strategy unlocked under these directives was designed not just to repel invaders, but to break their capacity to wage war entirely. Psychological warfare integrated seamlessly into tactical operations. Human broadcasts, stripped of emotion, leaked into enemy channels, stating positions and maneuvers with eerie accuracy, proving that nothing the enemy hid remained hidden. The alien coalition realized the depth of their mistake too late. They believed humans were unpredictable because of emotion. Instead, humans were unpredictable because they adapted faster than logic predicted possible. A disabled Earth colony taught them how to counter beam lances. A fallen patrol ship provided data for shield inversion. A destroyed research station cracked the enemy's encryption scheme. Humanity's strength wasn't aggression, it was reaction transformed into innovation with terrifying speed. What unsettled the galaxy most wasn't the power of human weapons, but the coldness behind their use. Humans did not gloat or threaten. They didn't broadcast triumphant messages or declare superiority. Their silence, broken only by coordinated tactical updates, felt like the quiet before a storm with no intention of ending until the threat was extinguished. The Council had wanted submission. Instead, they awakened a species capable of transforming every strike against them into fuel, every setback into progress, every loss into unwavering resolve. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They were becoming something the galaxy had never encountered, a force that learned mid-conflict, adapted without pause, and pursued victory with relentless precision. And for the first time, alien commanders felt something no simulation had ever predicted: fear of a species they once considered unable to survive the first blow. Humanity's rapid transformation from a planetary power to an interstellar war machine stunned the galaxy. The Council believed humans would fight reactively, scrambling to keep up, patching weaknesses as they appeared. Instead, Earth began evolving faster than entire empires could adjust. Every battle became a data harvest. Every alien tactic became a template to be dismantled, improved, and turned back against its originators. Humanity was no longer learning the rules of galactic warfare, they were rewriting them. Research hubs across the solar system pushed past limitations the Council assumed were unbreakable. Human scientists turned captured debris into blueprints, analyzing alloys, propulsion drives, shield cores, and reactor signatures with an intensity bordering on obsession. What took empires decades to understand, humans mastered in days. Reverse engineering wasn't a slow process. It was a race, and humanity ran it with a ferocity no alien species possessed. Patterns that had baffled entire civilizations yielded to human problem-solving in hours. The galaxy watched in disbelief as Earth leapfrogged centuries of technology through sheer urgency. The first symbol of this accelerated evolution emerged in orbit: Titan-class warships. These massive vessels, forged from experimental matter-bonded plating, dwarfed anything humanity had fielded before. They were built with armored hulls capable of regenerating microfractures mid-combat, internal bulkheads that shifted automatically to contain damage, and engines powerful enough to drag these floating fortresses through high-gravity distortions. Their weapon systems were layered: photon shred arrays, variable pulse cannons, and rail emitters capable of firing projectiles at relativistic speeds. Even their silhouettes felt like declarations: angular, heavy, unapologetic. While the Titans dominated space, other developments unfolded in the shadows. Ghost teams, elite special forces units formed from the most adaptable operatives Earth had ever produced, operated without recognition or public acknowledgement. These soldiers infiltrated alien dreadnoughts, dismantling them from within by crippling reactors, slicing through command networks, and slipping away before alarms finished sounding. Their missions were surgical and silent. Entire fleets collapsed because a handful of humans made precision incursions no alien security system could anticipate. The Coalition labeled them phantoms. Humanity simply called them necessary. Electronic warfare advanced just as aggressively. Human systems cracked the Coalition's encrypted channels through layered decoding sweeps that operated like swarms, thousands of parallel microprocesses working simultaneously. Once inside enemy networks, human operators didn't just intercept messages. They manipulated them, rerouted commands, and forced enemy vessels into friendly fire incidents. Alien officers couldn't trust their own instruments. Nav boards displayed illusions. Targeting sensors drifted seconds off cycle. Defense grids opened at the worst possible moments. Humans weaponized confusion, turning entire engagements into traps. Moral fractures spread through the Coalition as whispers grew into dread. Recruits spoke of human adaptability as if it were a curse. Captains reported that humans anticipated maneuvers before fleets executed them. Entire species accustomed to dominance struggled to comprehend opponents who evolved within the lifespan of a battle. Humans didn't follow predictable arcs of escalation, they restructured themselves continuously, discarding outdated strategies in real time. For the first time, empires that had crushed dozens of civilizations began to doubt their own invincibility. The turning point arrived during a confrontation in a strategically critical sector where the coalition deployed 5 combined fleets, convinced numbers alone would guarantee victory. Humanity sent a fraction of that force, relying on precision instead of mass. Drone swarms flooded the battle space, mapping weaknesses. Titans carved through enemy lines with controlled aggression. Ghost teams sabotaged command vessels before fleets even realized they were compromised. Electronic warfare shredded cohesion until entire formations drifted apart. The battle didn't last long. The coalition didn't retreat, they disintegrated. Survivors carried fragmented accounts back to their governments. They spoke of humans who fought without panic, without hesitation, without reliance on superiority in numbers. They described opponents who combined instinct with engineering, aggression with intellect, unpredictability with calculation. Stories spread across the galaxy of a species that turned every loss into growth and every victory into a foundation for the next evolution. The Council's perception shifted from arrogance to alarm. Humanity was no longer the outlier species they believed could be subdued with minimal effort. They had become a force shaped by pressure, strengthened by adversity, and propelled by a singular motive: ensure survival by becoming untouchable. In the silence after the turning point, the galaxy understood a new truth. Humanity would not merely defend itself. Humanity would rise until no empire dared to consider them weak again. Humanity's advance shifted from survival to dominance with a clarity that unsettled every intelligence agency across the Council's territories. The Coalition had expected retaliation, even escalation, but nothing prepared them for the precision with which humans dismantled the foundations of their multi-species alliance. Earth's leaders understood that crushing fleets wasn't enough. To prevent future aggression, they needed to undermine the enemy's capacity to wage war at every level: industrial, strategic, psychological. What emerged was a campaign crafted with such meticulous intent that alien strategists studying it later admitted they had never encountered anything comparable. Human tactical planning converged into a single doctrine: end the threat completely, not by annihilation, but by removing the enemy's ability to choose conflict again. This doctrine manifested first in the Scorched Void operations. Instead of targeting population centers or planetary infrastructure, human forces struck at supply convoys, refueling depots, wormhole prisms, and long-range communication hubs. The Coalition relied heavily on interconnected routes to move materials between distant territories. By severing these arteries with pinpoint accuracy, humans forced entire sectors to collapse inward. Fleets stranded without fuel became floating husks. Factories halted for lack of raw materials. No empire had experienced a dismantling so elegant and so thoroughly planned. While space operations unfolded, planetary campaigns demonstrated an entirely different form of mastery. Human ground forces initiated rapid entry strikes designed to end conflicts before they could escalate. Orbital drops saw armored divisions land with coordinated timing, bypassing defensive grids by using staggered descent trajectories that confused shield harmonics. Once on the ground, units operated with strict discipline, neutralizing military positions while deliberately sparing hospitals, agricultural districts, and civilian corridors. The Coalition expected brutality. What they witnessed was controlled force shaped by an unwavering objective. Worlds surrendered not because they were overwhelmed, but because they realized humanity was not interested in conquest, only in removing the capacity for hostility. Desperation spread through the Coalition ranks as the campaign accelerated. High Command attempted to marshal reserve fleets, only to discover that human infiltration teams had disabled key shipyards. Entire dreadnought production lines were rendered useless by microscopic saboteur drones that rewrote fabrication protocols. Some empires tried recruiting mercenary groups, but communication blackouts prevented contracts from confirming. Several species attempted to form splinter alliances, only to discover humanity had already mapped their backdoor negotiations and positioned strike groups between their rendezvous points. Amid this collapse, humanity broadcast a message across the galactic spectrum, calm, brief, and unmistakably deliberate. They stated that Earth had offered peace, had requested dialogue, had attempted to resolve the situation without conflict. The Council had chosen force instead. Humanity was now choosing consequences. The message wasn't threatening, but its certainty carried a weight that resonated through every listening chamber. Entire civilizations felt the shift. Earth was no longer pleading for recognition. Earth was defining the terms of its own survival. The shattering offensive followed this declaration. Human fleets launched simultaneous strikes across multiple sectors, overwhelming defensive grids through asynchronous warp entry patterns that no algorithm could predict. Titans broke through fortified lines, drone networks swarmed strategic positions, and electronic warfare units blanketed key systems until even basic navigation became a gamble. Within days, the coalition's core industrial rings, once considered untouchable, fell silent. The Council had underestimated how far humanity could reach once provoked. They had misjudged how quickly Earth could transform determination into capability. In the aftermath of these coordinated blows, a strange quiet settled over the galactic map. Coalition worlds ceased broadcasting threats and began transmitting pleas for ceasefires. Intelligence reports noted a profound shift in political rhetoric. Empires that once spoke of managing humanity now debated how to prevent their own extinction. Even the most hardline factions realized they had ignited a force that did not merely defend itself, it eliminated the possibility of future aggression with an efficiency that no species had ever displayed. For the first time since the conflict's beginning, the galaxy recognized the truth they had refused to admit. Humanity had not become dangerous because they sought power. They became dangerous because they were forced to abandon restraint. And the moment that restraint evaporated, the balance of the entire galactic order changed forever. The Council convened an emergency session for the first time in centuries, but the air lacked its usual arrogance. Delegates who once mocked humanity now spoke in hushed tones, their confidence shattered by the speed and precision of Earth's campaign. The galaxy had witnessed fleets disintegrate, infrastructure collapse, and strategic regions fall without humanity ever resorting to indiscriminate destruction. That restraint terrified them more than raw power. It meant every action had been deliberate, calculated, controlled. A species capable of overpowering empires had chosen not to exterminate them, and no one knew how long that mercy would last. When the request for negotiations finally reached Earth, humanity responded with a single, uncompromising condition: the Council would come to them. Not to neutral ground, not to a remote station, but to a secure chamber aboard a Titan-class vessel positioned on the edge of Council space. It was a symbolic choice. The empires would face the species they had tried to subjugate inside the beating heart of the war machine built to guarantee their defeat. The journey alone unnerved the delegates. Human escort ships guided them through corridors of silence. No taunts, no displays of dominance, only the quiet professionalism of a military that didn't need to boast. When the Council delegates entered the chamber, they found the human representative waiting. The same envoy they had once dismissed as a biological accident pretending to negotiate. This time, no one dared meet his eyes for long. Humanity did not provide threats or ultimatums. They presented facts. The coalition had attacked without provocation. Entire colonies had been wiped out. Diplomacy had been mocked. Earth had been forced into a war they never sought. Now the galaxy would face the consequences of that decision, consequences not shaped by vengeance, but by the need to ensure such aggression could never be repeated. The terms were delivered clearly, without embellishment. Humanity demanded recognition of full sovereignty over all human systems. Reparations for destroyed colonies, not as tribute but as acknowledgement of wrongdoing. A guaranteed demilitarized buffer zone around human space. A binding agreement that no empire would interfere in human affairs. These demands were not excessive, they were structural safeguards. Yet each one carried the quiet implication that refusal was not an option. What unsettled the council most was what humanity did not ask for. There was no demand for conquered territory, no insistence on resource access, no attempt to claim strategic sectors. Earth could have carved an empire from the ruins of its enemies. Instead, it asked only for security and distance. The galaxy realized then that humanity didn't fight for domination. They fought to remove threats. And once the threats were gone, they had no interest in ruling others. Delegates signed the accord with trembling hands. Each signature acknowledged that humanity had entered the galactic stage not as subordinates, but as a force that commanded respect through capability and discipline. As the final seal was pressed, a subtle shift rippled across the chamber. The council members sensed that something enormous had changed. The old order, the assumption of their superiority, was gone forever. When the session concluded, the human envoy offered a final message. Not a boast, not a threat, but a truth spoken with the calm certainty of a species that had learned its own strength the hard way. He reminded them that Earth had been peaceful by choice, diplomatic by belief, patient by principle. But patience had limits, and the coalition had crossed every line. If such aggression ever emerged again, humanity would not repeat a slow escalation. They would respond with the full weight of everything they had built during the conflict, and there would be no second negotiations. As the council ships departed, they carried the knowledge that they had encountered a species unlike any in the galaxy's history. A species that adapted under pressure, united under threat, and retaliated with precision so absolute that empires reconsidered every assumption they had ever held. Humanity returned to its worlds without fanfare, without triumphal processions, without claims of victory. They simply resumed life, stronger, wiser, and forever prepared. The galaxy would tell stories of them for generations. Not tales of conquest, but of awakening. Of a species pushed too far. Of a quiet world that rose not to rule, but to ensure no one would ever mistake their desire for peace as a sign of weakness again.